Hello, folks. This is Rebecca Adams, and I have my wonderful expert here on the other side of the screen. I have Becky Vermeire with me tonight. How are you doing?
Hello.
Yes, Jesus is Doubtfire. How can I ever interrupt that?
Maybe I jumped in a little too soon.
No, I kept going. I shouldn't have done that. Well, Becky has an awesome episode for us. And who knows, as we recorded, it might be 2 or 3 episodes. We'll see as we go along. She's got an awesome topic that I have asked about several times. And I'm really excited to get into this tonight. And so I'm just going to let Becky introduce it and go from there. And I'll have questions in between times, but go for it.
You don't want to see my socks tonight?
Oh, do you have socks? Yes,
you always ask me about my socks.
Of course I want to see your socks. What do you have
I got
for
a really good pair of socks tonight because it's been a little chilly around here lately.
Mm-hmm.
And we're moving to tail end of fall, closer to the beginning of winter. So I have my beach socks. And notice they say on the bottom, beach please. And so I guess you could read that as beach please. Mm-hmm. Or I mean, you could read it as beach please.
It depends on the day, kind of like your Snoopy shirt that says not today.
That's right. So I guess it kind of depends on where you put your emphasis. But anyway, those are my beach socks.
That reminds me of that filter you used where you had that beachfront going on behind you. Oh man.
Yes. Yes. As we move into the winter, I may just have to permanently move to the beach for a while.
You do that. You do whatever you need to. Move out of your beach house and move onto the beach.
You know what my life ambition is, don't you?
To be retired.
To be independently wealthy.
Oh, yes.
And then once I become independently wealthy, I'm going to buy my island and then be retired.
Oh, I have thought about that before. I've thought, what would that be like to buy my own island? Wow, that would just be so incredible.
That's the goal. I haven't figured out how to become independently wealthy, so that's the big hang up.
Well, details. I mean, come on. It's only a detail, Becky.
Just a small one.
There you go.
I thought one time maybe if I could win the lottery. But then I remembered that I never buy lottery tickets, so that's probably not going to work.
Well, you never know. You might find that one that somebody dropped on their way out of the store and you pick it up and it just happens to be a winner.
You never know. Yeah. It could happen. You just never know.
I had a coworker one time who gave out scratch off tickets for Christmas presents. She said, if you win the big one, don't forget about me. So you never know how you might get a winning lottery ticket. You never know.
Never know. Hasn't happened yet. So when I figure out how to become independently wealthy, though, that's the plan.
What I would love to do is I would love to move to Alaska, have a log cabin in Alaska, and just live there all year round. But I'm not going to be able to do that unless my family moves up there too. I can't be without my family.
Well, there's that. See, that's the benefit of having a private island. People want to be on the island, and then you get to control who's allowed to be there and who's not.
Ooh, right?
Yeah.
They can't just drop in on you.
That's right. Nobody's showing up unannounced.
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot.
And I'm delusional enough to think that on my own private island, I'll be able to have perfect weather all day, every day.
Well, there'll be storms once in a while or rain at least.
I don't think so. Not on my island. And there'll be no snakes. I don't want snakes on my island.
How are you going to do that?
Well, that's part of the plan. So when I figure out how to become independently wealthy, I'll be able to figure that out.
That's very good.
Yeah. So, but it hasn't happened yet. So we'll see.
Well, I just listened to a really good audiobook of this guy. It was back in the 60s, and he went to Alaska, built his own cabin by himself, and just all of his adventures. He lived there by himself in the middle of nowhere, and it was a plane that had to come in and bring his supplies and land
Wow.
in yeah, I mean, it was remote.
Yeah, it is.
And just all his adventures and the animals he saw and the bears and all that stuff, and it would really be something.
That would be fun.
Yeah, it
Till I
would.
got cold.
You know, of course, now I don't really want to rough it that much because I want central air for when it gets hot, and I want a furnace for when it gets cold. I want
Yeah.
electricity. I mean, yeah,
Running water, the whole deal.
yeah, yeah, you know,
Yeah. I appreciate those things myself.
yeah. So I want to rough it, but I don't want to rough it that much.
Yeah. I hear you. Do you want to show us a pair of earrings tonight?
Oh, I do. I just got these on Saturday.
Oh, yeah?
I love these. See if I can get them
Oh, yeah. Those are pretty.
turn around that way.
Sparkly.
They are. They're so pretty. $5.
That's what you
Pop,
always say. $5.
yep. Paparazzi, $5.
That should be your catchphrase. $5.
Yep. I got 6 pair of earrings on Saturday. So I had
Wow.
fun. I had fun. Yeah.
Nice.
My dog was
That's
in
exciting.
doggy daycare for three
Oh,
hours on it. Or no, that was a Friday. That was a test run to see how she would do for when I go on vacation. So yeah,
yeah.
she did. She passed with flying colors.
Oh, good.
Yes.
That's good news.
When I picked her up, he said, "She's quite the pistol." I said, "Oh yeah, you got her labeled right." But that's
Well, I'm
beside the
glad
point.
she did well.
What's that?
I said I'm glad she did well.
I am too. I am too.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive into your topic. I love this. And where did you get this topic? I love that part too.
Well, I'll tell you what, you and I had a conversation a while back about speaking to the employees of the crisis center
Mhm.
and the residents of the crisis center to try to find out, are there things that they'd like us to talk about that we haven't talked about? And this actually came from one of my employees who leads support groups at the crisis center. And she said, we spend a lot of time talking about red flags in abusive relationships. And she said, why don't topic on, let's say I've moved past the abuse and now I'm considering maybe I might want to start a new relationship. So instead of focusing on the bad, the red flags, what about learning how to focus on the positive, the green flags? And so I really like that because in my day-to-day life, I try to pride myself on being a positive person. I'm a
Mhm.
little bit Pollyanna. The glass is always half full. And so I like taking a topic like this and turning it into, let's look for the good. And if we find the good, maybe that's a sign that we can continue to pursue that. So green flags would be positive signs that indicate a healthy, loving relationship. So just off the top of your head, when you think about what does a healthy, loving relationship look like, what comes to your mind?
Because I had such a lack of respect in my marriage, I think probably one of the first things would be respect.
Mm-hmm.
That I would be given respect. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it from a selfish standpoint. Sorry, but you know, because I know, I think, I hope I would give them respect, but I would
Mm-hmm.
want to see respect given to me without me having to verbally say, "I want you to respect me."
Right. And
Mhm.
I definitely agree with you. I think that respect should be at the top of the list. Not only just respect for you as a person, but also respect for your boundaries. And in an abusive relationship, you can't even set boundaries.
Mhm.
And so that would be a huge red flag. And so starting a new relationship, if you can set boundaries, one,
Yeah.
and then part two, does this person respect those boundaries that you've set?
Mhm.
That's a good thing.
It is. And my second thing would be trust.
Uh-huh.
Because trust is the foundation of any relationship, whether it's somebody you work with, whether it's your neighbor, whether no matter what the situation is, when I drive down the street, I trust that the other drivers are going to be sane and sober and using the correct laws to drive their cars, as well. So literally trust is something that we don't even think about, but we
Right.
need to have it in any relationship as that very foundation. So
Yeah.
I would be looking for that as time went on. Can I really trust this person? Are they ever lying to me at all? Is everything that they say, what they do, what they actually carry out, along those lines?
Yeah. And
Mhm.
you're right. Trust is everything. If you have trust, if you don't have trust, you don't have a relationship.
No, you really
I mean,
don't.
that works not only in like an intimate partner relationship, but like you say, it works in the workplace.
Mhm.
It works with friends. It works with family, driving down the road, wherever else. Like trust is huge.
Mhm.
And if there's no trust, there's no green flag.
No. Mm-mm.
Does anything else come to mind?
I would want the ability to communicate back and forth, that there would just be that ease of conversation at
Hmm.
all times. And I realize there's times when, I just want to be quiet. So,
Hmm.
and I realize the other person would be the same way too.
Sure.
But to be able to easily converse and understand one another
Yeah.
and share, yeah, there needs to be something that's going to bond us. Yeah. That makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talk about communication. What about communication during conflict? Because the best relationships will have conflict. They can be
True.
a completely, totally healthy relationship, and conflict can still arise. So, what does communication look like? What's a communication style that would indicate a green flag during conflict?
The fact that you can both state your opinions and even state how a certain thing makes you feel without the other person getting bent out of shape, for lack of a better way to say it, without exploding in anger
Mhm.
and without turning and judging you because of what you just said.
Yeah. And then I think the next piece of that would be we've talked lots of times before about active listening
Mhm.
and not listening for the sake to answer, but listening for the sake of listening.
Mhm.
And so I think when we have conflict, if the other person's not willing to listen and hear what we have to say,
That's good.
that's a red flag.
Mhm.
And so I think that active listening, having the ability to remain calm during the conflict, um, supporting the other person's right to have an opinion,
Mhm.
all those things. And so I found this article that I kind of got me thinking about this conversation. And so we've talked a little bit about them. So the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Center, that's what it's called. They came up with green flags in a relationship. And here's what they say: actively listen, which we just talked about, know how to share their own feelings, keep their word. Here's a big part of that: their actions match their words. And
Yes.
so, what do we know to be true about abusers? Abusers are really good at words. They're really good at saying the things they think you want to hear. Or there's been a conflict and they're trying to say, "Gosh, I'm sorry, I'll never do that again." They say the right words. Or "I'll go to counseling," or, whatever it is. But
Mhm.
then there's no action that follows up with those words that were spoken. And so that's a huge red flag. And so somebody who can actually say something, "I will do this," or "I won't do that," fill in the gap. And then the actions match up with the words. That's a green flag.
That is
So
awesome.
then they talked about being sensitive to the other person's needs, supporting your growth, facing conflict head on, remaining calm and rational during conflict, which is hard for anybody to do.
Yeah.
Here's a big one though. In a healthy relationship, when conflict arises, there's an apology that takes place.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And not just a simple like, oh, I'm sorry. I mean, it's literally saying, I'm so sorry that I hurt you that way when I
Mhm.
said this, because I didn't mean to hurt you. And what I
Right,
should have said was this, and I
right.
should have said it with a better tone of voice. It's
Mhm.
literally owning up to your part in what you did wrong.
Exactly. So admitting I made a mistake, that's
Mhm.
huge, and that's something that typically an abuser is not willing to do.
Mm-mm.
But then saying sorry with the intent, how many times, don't get me on my sorry soapbox, you know where I go with that. But how many times have I implies change? Sorry implies difference. I'm not going to do that again. So if I jokingly tease you about your favorite pair of shoes and it hurts your feelings, I'm going to stop teasing you about your favorite pair of shoes because it hurts your feelings.
Right.
And really listening to how the other person is receiving the things that are being said.
Mhm.
Then they talked about boundaries, which was one of the first things that you said. They respect your boundaries, but here's part two. They have their own boundaries. So
Right.
when you're in a relationship with someone that's a healthy relationship, you set your boundaries, I set my boundaries, I respect yours, you respect mine. Coming out of an abusive relationship, that's a foreign concept.
Yeah,
Yeah. And then the last one they have on their list is they compliment you and express appreciation.
absolutely. You got to have that.
You know,
Mhm.
and that appreciation piece goes so far because you can be knocking yourself out. You know, how many times have I known people who are in a relationship where one person says, I'm committed to trying to change my behavior,
Mhm.
but it may take baby steps. If the other person in that relationship is willing to look at every baby step that you take and appreciate it, I see that you've made growth in this area. Or I see that you've stopped doing that thing, you know, whatever it is, and appreciate that because what that does, one, it provides validation to the person you're appreciating, but
Yeah.
two, it kind of motivates the person to keep doing it, keep
Yeah.
doing, keep taking those steps to change who you are or the behavior or whatever else it is. And so there's an element of complimenting and appreciating in a healthy relationship.
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah. So I really liked that quick little bullet points of the domestic violence and sexual assault center. That's what they're called. I really like that.
And I like the fact that to highlight on the giving the compliments that it's sincere, not that it's, oh, well, thank you for supper, or oh, something that would be that just wouldn't come across as genuine. It needs
Right.
to be a very sincere appreciation.
I know someone who thanks their partner every time they make a meal,
I love
and
that.
it's sincere. Thank you so much for making dinner tonight. It's not a, oh, that was good or oh, that wasn't good. I liked this part or I didn't like that part. It's a thank you so much for making dinner tonight. Period.
Yep. That is
And it's a sincere appreciation that the other person took the time to make the meal.
exactly. And that is one of I think there's only 7 things that I could come up with that was positive from my father. And
Mhm.
that was one thing he always did. He said, now, kids, thank your mother for making this meal. So we would all say thank you, and he would say thank you
Yeah.
because she
A
did work.
little appreciation goes a long way. It really does.
Yes, it does.
You know, and that carries over into the workplace or whatever else. Somebody does something. Saying thank you is a dying art, I'm afraid, but
Yeah,
it carries so much. You know, it means so much to the other person when it's sincere.
it really does. I was talking to a friend this weekend that's been going through some rough stuff, and they thanked me for being there because the other friend that they had that they could talk to that they'd known for, I forget, 45 years or something, that person had died. And so they didn't have that person anymore. They just needed somebody to talk to. They said,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And they were very specific about what I had done, that I had listened, that I don't mind when they call and that kind of thing. And so just thank you for being my friend. That is a rare and a dying art, just like you said. You
It
just don't
definitely
hear
is.
that kind of stuff. And it meant a lot.
Oh yeah, it definitely does.
Hmm.
Yeah. So then I found another study that was done by the National Domestic Violence Hotline. And so this one I kind of like to focus on a little bit for the topic of our conversation tonight. And the one thing that they said that I thought was really good is that all relationships exist on a spectrum from healthy to abusive, with unhealthy in the middle.
Oh, wow.
So healthy relationships, unhealthy relationships, abusive relationships. You can be involved in an unhealthy relationship and it's not an abusive relationship. It's just unhealthy.
Mhm.
And so I think that that's a good conversation to have,
Yes.
because we have to go back to the very beginning, the very first time we ever recorded anything, when we
Mhm.
talked about what is domestic violence. And domestic violence is purposeful behavior.
Mhm.
Purposeful behavior with an intent, a specific outcome that is intended. That's abusive behavior. Unhealthy relationships don't necessarily have to be abusive relationships, but they can be incredibly unhealthy. So,
Mhm.
we talk about toxic relationships. A toxic relationship could actually not necessarily be an abusive relationship if the person that's in the toxic relationship is not motivated by power and control, or the person who's being toxic.
Mhm.
If they're not motivated by power and control, if it's not purposeful behavior with a specific outcome in mind, guess what? It's not abusive, it's toxic. And so I always want to make sure that we put that out there, because there are a lot of unhealthy people walking around on our planet that are
Mhm.
not necessarily abusers. They're just super unhealthy
Mhm.
and they bleed toxicity everywhere that they go,
Yeah.
but they're not necessarily abusers. And so I think that we need to keep that in mind. It's more of a challenging conversation, I think, to have than is it healthy or is it unhealthy? Those are
Mhm.
given, right? But
Mhm.
is it unhealthy or is it abusive? That's where the lines get skewed a little bit. And so I think, in all fairness, we need to make sure that people realize you can be pretty toxic, but you may not be abusive.
That
So we
really
have to be
answers a
careful.
lot of, yeah, that answers a lot of questions for me. Thank you.
Like what? Like what questions?
People that I've had in my life that they were not healthy, but I don't know that I could really put my finger on it that they were necessarily abusive. But I couldn't keep them in my life. There was
Mhm.
just no way I could and be healthy myself. So that
Yeah,
really helps just clarify that one little thing right there. Well, what were they? Well,
right.
they were just unhealthy.
Yeah. And I use the expression all the time, they're just not capable.
Hmm.
Perhaps you enter into a relationship with this person and you see them playing with their niece or nephew, and they seemingly have a good relationship with children, and they have the ability to interact in a quote unquote healthy way with their niece or nephew. And
Hmm.
so then moving forward, say you're staying in this relationship and you decide to have children with this person, and then all of a sudden you're like, this person's a horrible father.
Hmm.
They're not being abusive, they're not equipped, they're not capable. And so for whatever reason it is, when they're not responsible for the kids, they can be the fun uncle, the funkle, but they can't be the good dad. It
Okay,
doesn't mean that they're abusive parents. An abusive parent, it means they're not capable.
that's
And so
interesting.
I think, we've talked about this before, where I say if you're trying to start a relationship with someone, you need to lay all your expectations out on the table. What does a healthy partner look like to you? That person answers that question and then reciprocates. What does a healthy partner look like to you? Okay, now we have a set of expectations that we understand. But if you think a healthy partner is somebody who never wants to go out with any of their friends and spends all of their time with you, if you think that's what healthy is, and the other person can't do that because they don't think it's healthy,
Hmm.
what do you do with that?
Right.
And it's not healthy if you only spend time with one person,
No, it's not.
but that doesn't necessarily make it abusive.
Right.
Yet isolation is a tactic of an abuser.
Hmm.
And so that's how easy it is to skew the lines.
Yeah. So
So when
how
we're talking, go
so
ahead.
so in that situation, how would you look at it over time? and make sure that that did not cross over into abuse?
You would do the check-ins. Like, first of all, if you sign for a relationship with someone who says you can only spend time with me, and the other person says, okay, I can only spend time with you, you've set yourself up to fail because it's an unrealistic expectation. So here's the problem. If I say, yes, I agree, I can only spend time with you, but then after I get past that initial falling in love stage where you only want to spend all of your time with that one person, right? That falling in love feels good, that kind of a thing. Once you get past that and you're like, I just want to go out with my friend. Now the other person gets mad at you. Whose fault is it?
Well, since you decided to spend all of your free time with them, then it's pretty much your fault.
There you go. And so that doesn't move the other person because they get upset about it. It does not move that other person into an abusive category.
Mm-mm.
Because you laid the cards on the table and this was the expectation. Now you're the one that's changing the expectation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're the one that says, I changed my mind, I can't spend all of my time with you, and the other person gets, whose fault is it? I mean, that's what you got to look at. And so is the person who gets mad because they laid their cards on the table and you agreed to this, and now they're reacting to the fact that you've broken your word. If they get mad, does that make them abusive?
No.
No. It's still unhealthy. The entire dynamic is completely unhealthy,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't make one person an abuser.
Right. I
So
like
that's
that.
what we
Thank
have to
you.
be careful of.
That's good.
And I really do wish that people would sit down and say, hey, here's my list of expectations. This is what I think the perfect partner looks like. And now you tell me what you think the perfect partner looks like. And I
Mm-hmm.
can do 75% of that. And that's good enough. Let's have a relationship. I wish we could do that and do our little negotiations. And we don't. We just don't do that. But
Mm-hmm.
there'd be a lot to be said for it.
It really would. And I don't know, I just find that really fascinating that you would to sit down and say, what do you expect in a partner? Well, what do you expect in a partner? I obviously I never did that.
I think it's really good advice, especially for someone who has escaped an abuser
Mhm.
and they've moved past that situation. They've done the work on themselves to be the best of them that they can be, the best person they can be,
Mhm.
and they're thinking about beginning a new relationship. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, what are the expectations here? In fact, I recommend it.
Mhm.
And if the other person is truly interested in being in a relationship with you, they'll say, okay, let's talk about it. And that's what healthy people do. And so the number one thing when we're talking about the study that I read, the number one thing when they're talking about a green flag for a healthy relationship is communication. And
So
is go
so
ahead.
if that person decided, well, no, I don't want to talk about it, then I would want to go ahead and say, well, if you don't want to talk about it, then I guess you're really not into this for a healthy relationship. Am I looking at that wrong?
You could be. I mean, it could be a couple of things. If you're going on a date for the very first time, and within 5 minutes of your conversation, you say, what's your expectation for a relationship? And the other person's like, I don't know. I just want to have dinner. That's
Right.
okay, that's acceptable, right?
Yeah.
And so time would play into that. The level of the intensity of the relationship would play into that. But at some point, after you've gone out with the person a few times, you're either thinking forwardly, this
Mhm.
is somebody that I could have a relationship with, or you're not. And there's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with saying, I'm thinking in a forward direction, and the other person saying, I'm not. So then
Mhm.
you have two choices.
Right.
I don't want to pursue this relationship with you then. That's
Mhm.
the choice. Or do you think at some point, some unspecified 3 months, you might want to have this conversation? Yes, I think I could have that conversation in 3 months. So then you decide, is it worth waiting for the 3 months and trying to build more of a relationship? Or
Mhm.
are you out? That's the thing is, because you're beginning a relationship with someone does not mean you're going to get married and be together for the rest of your lives,
Right.
right? It's a testing ground.
Mhm.
And so this is silly, but it just came into my head. In the same way when you start a new job. So at the crisis center, I hire somebody. I hire somebody based on an hour conversation, right? We sat down, we talked for an hour. I asked you questions. You answered them in a way that I thought, we're good. I'm going to offer you a job. So day one comes. Does that mean that I think that you're going to retire here? You're going to be here for the next 40 years? No. I'm hiring you with a 90-day probationary period.
Oh, yeah.
I get to know you, you get to know me. I get to see you interact with the people that work for me. I get to see how you handle the conflict. I get to see how you handle the crisis. I get to see how you handle the sad times, the glad times, all the times in between. And at the end of 90 days, we sit down again. And I say one of two things. This is really working out. I enjoy your presence here. You're doing a good job. These are the expectations moving forward. Can you sign off on those? Or I say, this isn't working out. Right?
You're doing a lousy job.
Right. So then there's that built-in out of I can get out of this. We should look at our dating relationships the same way. I can get out of this. The hard thing is you find yourself in a relationship with an abuser, it's too challenging to get out of. And so that's why I think when you're trying to meet start a new relationship, look for the green flags, but be aware of the red flags. You can't just focus on one or the other. And so if we have this conversation tonight and people are saying, well, I'm just going to start looking for all the green flags in people, I promise you, you will find them in an abuser, but they won't stand the test of time. And so we have to be careful about that, right? Because what do we know to be true about abusers? They're all about instant gratification. And I get to meet you and I know everything there is to know about you. And I want to spend all of my time with you because I'm so absorbed with you, blah, 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 blah. And then you're hooked, you're in the relationship, and that person starts to change. But if you go back to day one, every single person I've ever worked with has said, if I go back to day one, I can see the red flags.
Yeah.
I didn't see that time because of X, Y, and Z, but I can see the red flags. And so we're encouraging people to move forward with eyes wide open, not shut. And so, yes, if you're wanting to pursue a new relationship, I do think that it's a good idea to try to find positive things. It's a bad idea to only focus on positive things.
It makes sense.
And so then, you break it down. Is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Is it abusive? There are people that knowingly enter into relationships with unhealthy people and try to make it work with an unhealthy person. It doesn't make that unhealthy person abusive.
Very good.
So, there's that old cliche that men marry women hoping they don't change. And women marry men hoping to change them. There's that old cliche.
Yeah.
And really what needs to happen is two people sit down and they just be themselves. You don't have to change.
Yeah.
So I mean, that would fall over into the healthy column.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so let's look at communication and talk about what's healthy communication, what's unhealthy communication, what's abusive communication. And so you started that. One of the very first things you said was communication, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So healthy communication.
Before we dive into that, let's go ahead and stop this episode and then we'll start the next episode with that because I'm really super excited to get on this, what you're getting ready to talk to us about.
So we're done with that one already?
I know. It goes so fast. Crazy. So folks, please join us again for episode 2 when Becky is going to talk to us more about healthy relationships, unhealthy and abusive, and lay them all out very simply. And I've been dying to find out about this. So this is going to be really good. So thank you for joining us. And remember to like, subscribe, share if you're on YouTube. And you are always free. No matter where you are in this process, you're always free to soar.